Hello everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin. I was 19 when this happened, maybe just barely 20, and even now, years later, I still catch myself thinking about it whenever I'm walking alone at night. Back then, I was in that weird in-between stage. Old enough that people stopped calling me a kid, but not yet steady enough to feel like an adult. I was scraping by with a part-time job at a little record shop downtown, the kind of place that smelled like dust and vinyl, and living in a cramped upstairs flat above a laundromat in Eastboro. Eastboro wasn't dangerous, not really. It wasn't poor, but it wasn't shiny either. Just a small city that most people couldn't place on a map if you asked. It existed in this middle space, quiet, unremarkable, almost invisible. And at that time in my life, I thought that suited me just fine. What I didn't understand yet was that quiet doesn't always equal safe. Sometimes quiet is where the strange things happen, the things you don't see coming. That night, I'd been at my buddy Aaron's place. He and I had been close since high school, and his parents were the sort that didn't mind if a bunch of kids crowded their basement until 2:00 in the morning playing cards, talking trash, passing around cheap beer. It wasn't a wild party, but to us, it felt like freedom. At 19, that was all I wanted. Just the freedom to sit around without anyone breathing down my neck. By the time things wound down, most of the group called cabs or caught rides. I wasn't drunk, just lightly buzzed, my head a little floaty but still clear. I figured I'd walk. My apartment wasn't far, 40 minutes if I stuck to the main road, maybe an hour if I took the long way. And because I wasn't in a hurry, I chose the long way that meant Harrington Boulevard. The boulevard was different from the rest of Eastboro. A wide street lined with massive old houses built back in the early 1900s when people still thought in terms of estates. They weren't just homes, they were monuments, brick giants with stone columns, row iron gates, and lawns so obsessively manicured they looked artificial. In daylight, Harrington Boulevard looked like it had been ripped out of a magazine spread. But at night, with the yellow wash of street lamps painting everything in half shadows, it felt uncanny. Not frightening exactly, at least not to me at the time. Just like another world, like I was trespassing through someone else's dream. The silence was so complete I could hear my own footsteps bouncing off the stone flower beds in the median strip. I tilted my head back as I walked, staring up at the carved angels, lions, and gargoyle faces crouched on the rooftops. Dates like 1908 and 1912 etched into the stone. I wondered what lives had played out behind those tall windows, what families had walked those halls a century ago. I didn't belong there. I knew it. Black hoodie, jeans, beat-up skate shoes, the kind of outfit that screamed outsider in a place like that. But I wasn't thinking about how I looked. I just walked slow, hands in my pockets, enjoying that rare, fleeting joy when the world feels empty enough that you can pretend it belongs to you. Hey, you, what the hell are you looking at? The voice sliced through the quiet so sharply I stopped mid-step. My head jerked down from the rooftops. A man was sitting on the front steps of one of the houses to my right. I froze. Nothing, I blurted, my voice too sharp, too defensive. What's it to you? The man stood, and immediately my stomach dropped. He wasn't some homeowner winding down with a cigarette. He was enormous. Broad shoulders, thick arms, a shaved head that gleamed under the porch light. And the way he moved, heavy and deliberate, made the hairs rise on the back of my neck. What were you looking at? He demanded, his voice low, growly. The house, I said quickly, lifting my hands, palms out. Just the architecture. Chill, man, don't lie to me. His tone cut like a blade. He took a step closer, then flicked his eyes up toward the roof line before locking back on me. You casing it. You one of them, one of who? I stammered, instinctively backing up, my sneakers scuffing against the gravel of the median strip. Don't play stupid. He jabbed a thick finger at my chest, close enough that I felt the air shift. You think I don't notice when someone's been watching my house? Look, I swear I wasn't bullshit, he roared, the word exploding into the still night so loud and sharp it made my heart slam against my ribs. I kept backing away, hands still raised, palms out. My throat felt like sandpaper, every swallow scraping. Adrenaline pounded through my chest so hard it hurt. All right, man, I said, trying to steady my voice. I'm leaving. Just relax, okay? I started to turn, desperate for this to be over, but then I heard it. Click, clack, that unmistakable sound froze me mid-step. My stomach bottomed out. Turn around, he ordered. Slowly, painfully slowly, I turned back toward him. The gun was in his hand now, no mistaking it, no hoping it was fake. Not a movie prop, not a bluff. Heavy real steel, catching the porch light in a glint of dark silver, and it was aimed squarely at my chest. Don't move. My hands shook so badly I thought they might just drop. On their own, he started talking fast, voice sharp and cracked, spilling out like a dam bursting. You think I don't know what's happening? You think I don't notice the cars creeping by, the same bastards circling, waiting for me to slip up, and the cops, they don't give a damn. I called them over and over, told them someone's after my house. You know what they told me, lock your doors. He let out a bitter laugh. Lock my doors while they come back with crowbars, while they tear apart everything I've built. His voice caught jagged, and for a split second I saw something behind all the rage fear. Naked and raw. I'm not letting it happen again, he said, pacing the steps now, gun still leveled on me. Last year they broke in while my daughter was upstairs. Do you understand that? She was sleeping upstairs. His voice cracked on the word and his face twisted. She hasn't been the same since. And you think I'm just going to sit here and wait for round two? I believe you. I stammered, my voice shaking as hard as my hands. But I'm not, sir, I'm not them. I swear, I was just walking, that's all, just walking. His eyes pinned me in place, wild, bloodshot, but glassy at the corners, like he hadn't had a full night's sleep in weeks. Please, I whispered, voice breaking under the weight of the barrel pointed at me. I'm not a thief. I'm not casing anything. I was just going home. I don't even live around here. I work at the record shop on Harlan Street. Ask anyone. I'm nobody. For a moment he didn't speak, just stared at me, breathing ragged, finger dangerously close to the trigger. My lungs screamed for air, but I didn't dare move. Finally he rasped, swear to me. Swear you'll never walk this street again. I swear. I burst out. I swear to God. He stood there forever, weighing whether I was worth believing. Then slowly the gun lowered. Get out of here, he muttered. I didn't wait to be told twice. I backed away, never taking my eyes off him until I was far enough, then turned and walked fast, too fast to look casual, not fast enough to count as running. My whole body trembled, teeth chattering from adrenaline, knees weak with every step. By the time I reached the main road with its hum of late-night traffic and steady line of street lights, my legs almost gave out. I leaned on a lamp post, lungs burning, heart thrashing in my ears. I didn't breathe. Right again until I got back to my flat, locked the door twice, and sat on my bed shaking until dawn poured through the window. People warn you about bad neighborhoods. They tell you to avoid the dark alleys, the run-down blocks where desperate people might do desperate things, but no one warns you about the good neighborhoods. no one tells you that the scariest thing might not be a mugger in the shadows. It's a man convinced he's protecting his castle. A man so twisted by paranoia that every stranger looks like an enemy. I wasn't in danger because I'd done something wrong. I was in danger because I stumbled into the wrong place at the wrong time in front of the wrong man. And I'll never forget the weight of that barrel aimed at my chest, or the way his eyes looked, tired, broken, and desperate to protect something he was already losing. I never set foot on Harrington Boulevard again. I was 17 in the summer of 1976, living in Havley, a gritty little industrial town just outside of Pittsburgh. Back then, the steel mills were still alive, grinding day and night. If you stood outside after midnight, you could hear the low metallic hum drifting across the river or see the orange glow of the smokestacks bleeding into the night sky. Havley wasn't the kind of place you bragged about. Crime, drunks, and fights were just part of the background noise, but to us kids it was familiar, and we'd already mapped out the blocks you didn't walk after dark. That summer was supposed to be the crown jewel of my teenage years. My best friends, Mark and Eddie, and I had been scraping together cash for months just to see our favorite rock band play in Pittsburgh. Groceries bagged, gas station floors swept, loose change hoarded. It all finally paid off. I'll never forget walking into that concert hall, the sticky reek of spilled beer, the cigarette haze curling under the lights, and then that deafening explosion of cheers when the band struck the first chord. For 2 hours, the world didn't exist outside that music. By the time we stumbled back onto the train heading for Havley, it was close to midnight. The cars were mostly empty, just a couple of older men sleeping with folded newspapers for pillows and a young mom swaying gently as she rocked her baby. We were still wired voices hoarse from singing along. When the train screeched to a stop in Havley, we spilled out into the thick August night. The air was damp and heavy, sticking to our skin. Street lights hummed above us, their halos buzzing with moths. Mark pulled a warm Coke from his backpack and cracked it open with a hiss. "You believe that encore?" he said, passing it around like communion. Eddie tipped his head back, still grinning like a fool. "If I die tomorrow, bury me with that memory," he said, voice breaking half with laughter, half with awe. I laughed too, though quietly, because a part of me already felt that hollow ache, that strange sadness you get when you realize the best moment of the night has already passed. The walk home was routine, 20 minutes down Lincoln Avenue, cut over on Maple, and then we'd split for our neighborhoods, nothing to it. By the time we reached the main intersection at Lincoln and Ashland, it was about 1:15. The traffic light clicked lazily from green to red, even though the streets were deserted. Our sneakers tapped against the cracked pavement, the sound carrying in the still air. That's when we noticed the car. A brown station wagon rolled slowly into the intersection. Coming to a stop dead center, the headlights were off, but the low grumble of the engine carried in the silence. The car looked like it had been dragged out of a junkyard, rust blooming across the fenders, one hubcap gone, paint dull and scratched. The driver's window squealed as it rolled down. The man inside leaned out, elbow propped casually on the door. He looked mid to late 20s, maybe 30. His hair was long and greasy, plastered against his temples like it hadn't seen soap in weeks. At first, I thought he'd just ask for directions. People got lost in Havley all the time. "Yo, you lost?" "Buddy," Mark called, still buzzing from the concert, his tone light joking. The man smiled, but it wasn't the kind of smile you return. It was tight, strange, the kind that made my stomach knot. His teeth caught the glow of the streetlight, too sharp, too deliberate. Then he moved slow, as if he had all the time in the world, and lifted something from his lap. "A pistol? Which one of you wants it first?" he asked. His voice was calm, almost casual, like he was offering us a cigarette. For a second, my brain flat out refused to process it. Eddie froze, his eyes going wide. The Coke bottle slipped from his hand and exploded on the asphalt. Mark sucked in a sharp breath like all the air had been knocked from his chest. My heart hammered so hard I couldn't hear anything else. "Run," I whispered, though it barely came out. All three of us bolted. We tore across the intersection, sneakers pounding the pavement like gunshots of their own. And then the real ones came. 1, 2, 3 cracks split the night, echoing off the dark buildings around us. Each shot seemed to punch the air from my lungs. Every step I braced for the sting of a bullet in my back. "Jesus Christ, keep going," Eddie screamed, his voice raw, breaking apart. We dove head first into a cluster of bushes along the edge of Ashland Park, branches clawing at our faces, thorns scraping our arms. My chest burned, my breath ragged, but all I could think was that somehow, against reason, we were still alive. We crouched low in the bushes, lungs heaving so hard I was sure the sound alone would give us away. My chest burned and every inhale scraped like fire. I risked a glance back toward the intersection, empty. The street light still blinked its lazy cycle, casting pale green. Then, red across the pavement, the station wagon was gone. For a moment, a thin thread of relief slid through me, but it was fragile, a lie my body wanted to believe. My hand shook as I wiped sweat from my forehead. Mark met my eyes. He didn't say it, but I knew he was thinking the same thing. Just because we couldn't see him didn't mean he wasn't still out there. "We can't go back toward Lincoln," I whispered, too open. Eddie nodded quickly, his face pale and slick with sweat. "Cut through the back, the gravel road by the park. We all knew it. Kids in Havley used it as a shortcut. The old path, running behind Ashland Park, ending near a cluster of quiet neighborhoods. Without another word, we crept out of the bushes and started down it, our sneakers crunching softly on the gravel. The silence between us was heavy, broken only by our breathing and the occasional nervous glance over each shoulder. That's when I saw it. At the far end of the road, tucked beneath the shadow of a sycamore, a car sat parked. Even in the dim spill of a street lamp, I recognized it immediately. The dented bumper, the missing hubcap, the brown station wagon. "Shit," I muttered, my throat suddenly dry, as if in answer, the headlights snapped on, stabbing the darkness, blinding us. The engine revved, loud, guttural, taunting. "He's waiting," Eddie whispered, his voice trembling. "He knew we'd come this way. Fence," Mark hissed. We scrambled for the nearest wooden fence, clawing our way up. Splinters dug into my palms as I hauled myself over and dropped hard into someone's backyard. My knees buckled against the grass, but adrenaline yanked me upright before I could think. Behind us, the wagon roared forward, gravel spraying. We didn't stop. Fence after fence we climbed, yards blending into one another. We crashed through hedges, tripped over abandoned toys and lawn chairs, tore through gardens and startled barking dogs. Every sound felt like a beacon. At one chain-link fence, I hauled myself up, panting, and as I glanced toward the street, I saw the wagon flash past, headlights slicing. "The night he was hunting us. He knows the streets," I gasped. "He knows where we'll come out," and it was true. Twice more we saw him. Once near Willow Lane, where he cut us off so close I thought we'd run straight into his grill. Another time at Maple, his tires screeching as he skidded to a stop. Only for us to dive back into the shadows like rats. My arms and legs were raw with scrapes, my lungs threatening to tear open, my heart a drum beat had of panic. By around 1:30 a.m., half delirious from exhaustion, we stumbled over a fence lined with barbed wire. My shirt ripped down the side, metal teeth raking across my arm, warm blood seeped fast, soaking the fabric. Eddie cried out as his jeans snagged, tearing the denim and skin beneath. We tumbled into darkness, landing in soft earth that stank of manure. "A paddock. Stay down," Mark rasped, his voice. We flattened ourselves against the muck, crouching low, My arms quivered, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might shake the ground. Then the sound came, the screech of tires, the distant roar of the engine circling. Headlights swept across the edges of the field, searching, slicing the night. I swear I could feel him, his eyes, his focus, scanning the fields with that same patient hunger. For 15 endless minutes we didn't move, we barely breathed. I counted every heartbeat, every distant hum, waiting for the moment he found us. Finally, mercifully, the sound faded. The engine growled into the distance until there was nothing left but the buzzing of crickets and the ringing in my ears. It was nearly 2:30 by the time we crawled back toward the main road. Every set of headlights in the distance made us freeze, our bodies locking tight. Each time a car approached, I braced, certain it would be him again. But it never was. By 3:00 a.m., we finally stumbled into familiar streets. The neighborhood lights looked strange, almost unreal, like we'd stepped back into a world we weren't sure still existed. We dropped Eddie off first. His porch light clicked on, his mother stepping out in her nightgown, scolding him for being out so late. She had no idea what had just stalked her son through the night. Mark walked me the rest of the way. Neither of us spoke. Our throats were too dry, our bodies wrung out. When I finally collapsed onto my bed, I didn't sleep. I just stared at the ceiling, every creak of house warping into the sound of an engine idling outside. A week later, the news broke. An elderly woman shot dead walking home from bingo 2 neighborhoods over. No robbery, no motive, just a bullet in the dark. The suspect's car, a brown station wagon. Was it him? I'll never know. But that night cracked something in me. The world felt thinner after that. Fragile, punctured. Even now, decades later, if a car idles outside my window, my chest tightens with that same primal fear. Because sometimes you escape, but you never really get away. I always told myself moving to Leavenford was the right choice. Back in 2020, when I stuffed my life into boxes and left Glasgow, I felt like I was escaping. I needed somewhere slower, a town where I could breathe without hearing sirens or drunken shouting at 3:00 in the morning. Leavenford seemed perfect near the coast, rent that didn't break me, and the kind of place where strangers still nodded when you passed them on the street. I was 25 then, restless, worn thin by the city, the constant noise, the push and pull of crowds, the unease of brushing shoulders with people who felt like they might snap at you for no reason. It had ground me down. I found a tiny one-bedroom flat above a bakery on Shore Street. Each morning the smell of fresh bread seeped through my window, soft and warm, almost enough to make me forget the thin walls and squeaky pipes. It was far enough from the pubs that the late-night chaos didn't quite reach me. At first, I didn't know anyone, and the loneliness was sharp, but eventually I built a rhythm. Shifts behind the bar at the Kingfisher Arms, quiet grocery runs, slow walks home through the car park into my neighborhood. I'm only 5'1", and I've always been aware of how small that makes me. Walking home at night, I'd hunch my shoulders, keys pressed between my fingers the way every woman I know has been taught. My mom used to roll her eyes and say, "Don't be daft, Maggie. Nobody's thinking about you like that." But she didn't see what I saw. She didn't feel those strange little moments, men lingering too long in doorways, someone staring a second too hard. I knew better. This happened last autumn, not long after I turned 29. It was a Friday, one of those punishing shifts where by the end I was sticky with beer and sweat, hair clinging damp to my forehead. Midnight was brushing close when Jenny and I finally locked up. Like always, we split at the corner, her right, me left. My walk home wasn't far, maybe 20 minutes, but in the dark, it always stretched itself out. That night, the air was sharp and clean, carrying the sea salt tang inland. The streets weren't completely dead. 1 or 2 cars drifted past, a porch light here and there, but quiet enough that my footsteps rang out louder than I liked. I cut through the co-op car park, the shortcut I always took. Usually it sat empty that late. Maybe a couple of cars left overnight, but the moment my shoes hit the tarmac, I felt it. A shift like stepping into a room where a conversation has just been smothered. 3 cars were parked. Nothing strange about that. But at the far end, I spotted him, a man moving in the same direction I was headed. Dark jacket, cap pulled low on its own. Unremarkable. Still, something about the way his body carried itself, too steady, too deliberate, kept my eyes hooked. Stop it, Maggie. I scolded myself. People walk home all the time. Don't spiral. But my pace eased just a fraction, ears straining, heart tuned to the rhythm of footsteps. By the time I stepped off the tarmac and onto the main road, I risked a glance back. He was there 40 FD behind, steady, closing the same distance I was trying not to shrink beneath. I crossed the road to opposite pavement, pretending it was just to check for cars, but really I wanted to see what he'd do. He crossed too, my stomach twisted, that sick, undeniable lurch that comes when instinct screams before your brain can catch up. My hand gripped the strap of my bag tighter, fingers brushing against the glass brew bottle inside. It wasn't much, but at least it had weight. Something solid I could swing if it came to it. The street ahead stretched long and empty, washed in that dull orange glow from the lamps. They buzzed faintly, throwing shadows that pulled and shifted between them. My flat was still a mile away, too far. The sound of his footsteps grew quicker, sharper, until I realized he was catching up faster than I expected. Within minutes, his pace was lined perfectly with mine, close enough that I could feel him there without looking. My shoulders locked, my head straight ahead, pretending not to notice. Then his voice, "Hello there, how are you tonight?" Too calm, too close. I kept walking, eyes fixed on the road. He tried again. "You heading to work?" "No." My voice came out flat, clipped. "Going home then?" "Yeah." "Do you live along here?" My throat tightened. I didn't answer, fingers clamped so hard around the glass bottle my knuckles screamed. He shifted closer, leaning just enough to angle his face toward mine. "Whereabouts do you stay? I know this road pretty well." Every alarm in me went off at once. Nobody asks that at midnight, not if they mean well. My chest burned, but I stayed silent, eyes pinned forward. I slowed my pace, thinking maybe he'd just pass me. For a moment, it looked like he would. He edged ahead, only to slow down too, hanging back just enough that I'd either have to walk beside him or fall behind awkwardly. I chose to fall behind. My feet dragged until it felt like I was crawling. Up ahead, he stopped, turned halfway, just stood there on the pavement, waiting like he had all the time in the world. The street had gone eerily quiet, only the wind pressing through the hedges. My free hand slipped into my jacket pocket. Fumbling for my phone, I pulled it out dead. The battery had been temperamental for weeks, but I'd gambled it would last the walk. My stomach plummeted. I forced my face blank, though every part of me was trembling. He started walking again, slower this time, glancing back at me every few steps. Watching, that was when I saw it. A narrow path cut into the hedges, leading to a block of flats almost hidden from view. I didn't think. I just darted down it, crouching low behind the thick hedges. The iron brew bottle was still in my hand, slick with sweat. My heart hammered so hard it drowned out everything else. I stayed there, crouched and small, counting minutes by my shallow breaths. 125, nothing but wind and my pulse pounding in my ears. Finally, I dared to glance through the leaves. The road was empty. I didn't move right away. I forced myself to stay crouched for nearly 10 minutes, every shadow stretched into his shape, every sound twisting into footsteps. When I finally stepped out, I checked everywhere behind bins, bus stops, hedges, convinced he'd still be there, waiting, but the street was bare. I made it home, but the silence inside my flat was heavy, pressing. I locked the door twice, checked every window. sat awake for hours with the glass bottle still next to me on the couch. I'll never know what that man really wanted. Maybe he was drunk. Maybe he thought he was being friendly. Or maybe he was testing me, probing how far he could push before I broke. But I know this much. If you see a woman walking alone at night, don't approach her. Don't ask where she lives. Don't close the space when her body screams discomfort. You might think you're harmless, but you're not. And if you're the one being followed, listen to your gut. Be cautious, even if it feels paranoid, because the alternative, you might not get another chance. That night I lost him, but even now, every time I step into that car park after a shift, my chest tightens, braced for the sound of footsteps that don't belong to me. I was 19 years old when this happened, and even now, years later, it remains the single most terrifying night of my life. No matter how many times I run it back in my head, trying to reason it out, the memory always leaves me cold. My name's Ethan Price, and back then I lived in a small rural town in Oregon, one of those places that sits quietly between endless farmland and deep sprawling woods. It was the kind of town where everyone knew your name, where you couldn't buy a soda without running into someone who knew your mom. We had one grocery store, 2 diners that never changed their menus, a gas station, and a Domino's where I worked part-time while taking community college classes. I'd been at Domino's since I was 17, usually evening shifts. It wasn't glamorous work, but you bonded fast with people who were all just trying to scrape by, saving for school, keeping the lights on, or just killing time until something better came along. I didn't mind it much. The money wasn't great, but the rhythm of tossing dough, taping boxes, joking with co-workers, it made the hours go by easy enough. The only real downside was the walk home. I didn't own a car. I was trying to save, but tuition, books, and bills always ate into whatever I managed to stash away. My house sat about 3 miles from Domino's, and the fastest way back was straight down Maple Creek Road. By daylight, that stretch of road was almost beautiful. Sunlight filtering through the pine branches, fog curling low across the ground like smoke. But at night, it became something else. The woods felt alive in a way that wasn't comforting. They grew quiet, too quiet, and it always felt like something unseen was listening. My mom hated that walk more than I did. When I first got the job, she made me carry pepper spray. I laughed it off, but I kept it in my pocket every shift, partly for her peace of mind, partly because, well, you never know. That night, my shift ran later than usual. Normally, I clocked out around 6:30, but right before close, we got slammed. 2 big orders for pickup. Cleaning up after that mess pushed us way past schedule. By the time I finally scanned out, it was 7:40 and the sun was long gone. As I headed out, Maya, one of my co-workers, locked up behind me. She tugged her hoodie tight and glanced at the empty road. "You good walking?" she asked, concern softening her usual teasing voice. "Yeah, I'll be fine." "Not my first night," I said, giving her a crooked smile. "You should really get a car," she shot back, half joking, but her eyes lingered on me a second longer than usual. "I'm working on it," I muttered, slinging my backpack over my shoulder. She gave me a little wave before climbing into her boyfriend's truck. I watched the tail lights disappear toward town before turning toward Maple Creek Road. The streets were hushed, a couple neon signs buzzed from the gas station, and the faint hum of a vending machine drifted through the empty lot of the grocery store. In less than 10 minutes, I was out of town, standing at the edge of the woods. Maple Creek stretched ahead of me, a strip of black top swallowed on either side by towering pines. Their branches knotted together so thick they swallowed the stars whole. There was no sidewalk, just a thin shoulder and a sharp ditch. Every so often, a car would sweep by, its headlights carving pale tunnels through the dark. But then it would fade, leaving only the scrape of gravel under my sneakers and the press of silence all around me. About halfway into the woods, I heard it, a sound so faint I almost dismissed it, a dry rustle like brittle leaves being stepped on. I stopped dead in my tracks, my heart jerking against my ribs as I turned toward the tree line. My phone's light sliced through the dark like a shaky blade, illuminating nothing but trees and crooked shadows. My heart was hammering too fast, but I forced out a shaky breath. Probably a deer. I muttered under my breath, trying to convince myself more than anything. Then something small bounced across the asphalt with a sharp clack. A rock. It skittered to a stop not 2 FT in front of me. My chest tightened instantly. That wasn't an animal. I jerked my phone light back toward the tree line, and that's when I saw him. A man stood there between the trunks, maybe 20 FT back. His clothes melted into the darkness, but I could make out the shape of him. Tall, thin, unmoving. He lifted one arm and began to wave, slow, deliberate. Every nerve in my body screamed to keep walking, to run if I had to. But instead I heard myself say, hey, do you need something? His answer came low, like a whisper forced through clenched teeth. Hey, come over here. I want to show you something. The sound crawled up my spine. Every hair on my arms rose. I can't. I called back, my voice cracking despite my effort to sound calm. I've got to get home. It'll only take a second. He said sharper this time, like urgency wrapped in menace. I really need your help. I froze. My mom's voice echoed in my head, sharp and familiar. Don't stop for strangers in the dark ever. But his tone was strange. It wasn't outright threatening. It sounded like pleading, like desperation. That tiny hesitation in me was all it took. I'll help, but I only have a minute. I said, hating myself for it even as the words left my mouth. That's all it'll take, he whispered. I stepped off the road. The gravel crunched beneath my sneakers, loud in the silence. My phone's flashlight shook in my hand, the beam jumping from tree to tree. He didn't move until I was nearly beside him. Then, without a word, he raised a finger and pointed deeper into the woods. There, look, he murmured. I followed the line of his hand and saw it. A pit in the ground, wide and dark. At first glance, I thought it was a sinkhole, but the edges were too sharp, too neat. Someone had dug this. What is that? I asked, my throat tight. Found it earlier. The man whispered, his voice closer now, right behind me. I want to know what's down there. Don't have a light. Shine yours. Something twisted deep in my gut. This was wrong. Everything about this was wrong. Still, I leaned forward slightly, lifting my phone out over the hole. The beam cut into the blackness. I never got the chance to see what was inside because the man shoved me. I yelped, the sound catching in my throat as my body pitched forward. My stomach dropped and then impact. Pain flared hot in my ribs as I slammed into the bottom nearly 20 FT down. The ground beneath me was damp, soft, almost spongy. Groaning, I dragged myself onto my knees, clutching my side, and swung my phone around. The light landed on something pale, someone pale, a girl. She looked around my age, sprawled on the dirt like a broken doll. Her skin was drained of all color, her body covered in cuts and bruises. She was naked, she was lifeless, she was dead. My whole body went cold, my lungs locked. Bile rose in my throat. Above me, his shadow leaned across the edge of the pit. What the hell is this? I screamed, my voice cracking into the night. He didn't answer. When I staggered toward the dirt wall and tried to climb, my hands slipping again and again, he was gone. I don't know how long I was trapped down there. Half an hour, maybe more. My hands shook so badly I could barely dig my fingers into the wall. Again and again, I slid back down, the dead girl's body only a few feet away, until finally, I clawed my way out. By the time I stumbled back onto Maple Creek Road, my phone battery was down to a sliver. My legs carried me in a staggering run, half gasping, half sobbing, twisting to look behind me every few seconds as if he'd appear out of the dark. When I reached my front door, I collapsed against it, covered in dirt, my throat raw from screaming. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't call the police. I just called Ryan, my closest friend, and through ragged breath told him I'd seen something I could never unsee. I begged him to keep it secret. For days, I avoided Maple Creek Road. I barely slept, and when I finally dared to check the news, I found nothing. No missing girl, no reports of a body, no mention of anything in those woods. It was as if it had never happened, but I know what I saw. I know what I felt beneath me when I landed, and I know that man is still out there somewhere. Even now, walking past those woods in daylight, I feel it. Eyes on me, hidden, patient, watching, waiting, and I can't shake the fear that someday someone else will hear a whisper in the dark and make the same mistake I did. I grew up in a city in South Texas that people usually summed up in one phrase, rough around the edges. My neighborhood wasn't the kind of place you showed off on Instagram. The sidewalks were cracked and uneven. Corner stores hid behind barred up windows, and almost every night, the faint wail of police sirens drifted through the sticky air like background noise you eventually stopped noticing. By the time you hit your teenage years, you didn't flinch at it anymore. The broken street lights that blinked on and off, the stale cloud of cigarette smoke that clung to bus stops, the random shouting matches that burst out 2 blocks down. You just accepted it all as the rhythm of where you lived. When this happened, I was 18. My name's Isabella, though everyone called me Izzy. My mom had always been strict about one rule, home by 10. No excuses. She said it so often it felt etched into my brain. Sometimes I'd roll my eyes at her like any teenager would, but deep down I got it. It wasn't just about curfews. It was survival in a place where wrong timing could mean wrong company. That night, I was at my friend Carla's house only a few blocks over. We spent hours in her room, sprawled across the bed, swapping playlists, whispering about stupid school drama, and cracking up whenever her little brother tried to hover at the door to eavesdrop. It was one of those easy nights where time disappears until suddenly you realize it's gone. I checked my phone and froze. 9:45. Crap. My mom's going to kill me. I blurted, yanking my backpack onto my shoulder. Carla walked me to the door. You sure you don't want me to ask my brother to walk you? I shook my head, already restless. Nah, I'll be fine. I'll cut through the tunnel. I've done it 100 times. I'll be home before 10. Carla's frown deepened. Still, that tunnel gives me the creeps. You never know who's hanging around in there. I tried to laugh it off, though my own stomach tightened at the thought. Yeah, well, my mom will give me more hell if I'm late than if I get spooked. I'll be fine. The tunnel was this underpass that ran beneath the highway, dividing our neighborhood. In daylight, it wasn't too bad. Kids skated through it. Workers pedaled their bikes, and sometimes you'd even see graffiti artists finishing up a mural. But at night, it was different. The overhead bulbs cast weak orange light that flickered like dying candles, and the sound of your own footsteps ricocheted back at you as if someone else was walking right beside you. Adjusting my backpack, I set off toward it. The South Texas heat clung to me, thick and sticky, even though the sun had long dropped behind the rooftops. Above, I could hear the muffled thunder of cars rushing across the highway. The moment I stepped inside, the tunnel swallowed me. My sneakers tapped against concrete, the sound echoing too loudly in the hollow space. I kept my head down, eyes forward. That was the unspoken rule. Don't stare at anyone. Don't linger, just move. Halfway through, I heard it. Footsteps behind me, my stomach clenched. I slowed for just a second, telling myself it was nothing. Just another person cutting through. But the rhythm of the steps grew clearer, closer, steadier. My chest tightened with each one. Then a voice broke the air. "Hey." The word bounced around the tunnel walls. I turned my head slightly, just enough to see him from the corner of my eye. A man, late 20s, maybe early 30s. Tall, unshaven, dressed in a faded hoodie that sagged at the shoulders. His face tilted toward me, and the weak tunnel light caught his eyes in a way that made bile rise in my throat. "You're really pretty," he said with a crooked smile. His voice was calm, almost casual, which somehow made it worse. "You want to hang out sometime?" I forced a stiff, polite smile, though my mouth was dry as sand. Thanks, but I'm only 18 and I've got a boyfriend." He smirked like I hadn't said a word. "So what? You can still give me your number, right?" My grip on my backpack strap tightened until my knuckles etched. "No, I don't think so. Please, I just need to get home." He let out a low chuckle, the kind people make when they're pretending to joke. But his eyes didn't match the sound. "Ah, don't be like that. I'm just trying to be nice." The way he said nice sent a chill through me. He picked up his pace, his footsteps suddenly sharper, louder, echoing quicker against the tunnel walls. My pulse kicked into overdrive. I quickened mine, too, eyes locked on the faint glow at the end of the tunnel. Street lights, safety, just a few more steps, I told myself. Just keep moving. But before I could reach the exit, two hands lunged at me from behind, rough, calloused palms. One clamped around my neck, squeezing so hard black spots swam in my vision. The other yanked at my arm, jerking me off balance. My backpack slid off my shoulder, crashing onto the concrete with a dull thud. "Don't scream," he hissed into my ear. His breath was sour, the words like a blade. Panic detonated inside me. My legs kicked wildly, searching for leverage. I stomped down hard on his foot, clawed at the iron bar of his arm, crushing my throat. My chest heaved in shallow, broken gasps, wheezing as air fought to reach my lungs. My fingers scrambled for anything, and then, salvation, the small pocket knife I always kept tucked in my bag. My hand closed around it like instinct. Without a thought, I flipped the blade open and slashed backward. The steel tore across his arm. He screamed, a raw, guttural howl that ricocheted off tunnel walls, filling the space like an alarm. His grip loosened instantly. I shoved against him with every ounce of strength I had and stumbled forward, legs buckling before catching again. I didn't look back. I ran. My sneakers slapped the concrete, each step louder than the last. My breath ripped through my chest, ragged, shallow. The orange tunnel lights blurred into streaks as tears burned my eyes. Behind me, his voice bellowed in pain and fury, a string of curses that chased me into the night. When I finally burst out of the tunnel and onto my street, the air hit me like freedom. I didn't dare glance over my shoulder. I just sprinted block after block, my chest on fire, my legs shaking violently. By the time I reached my house, I was sobbing, fumbling my keys with trembling hands. They slipped from my fingers and clattered onto the porch. I snatched them up, shoved the door open, and collapsed inside. Izzy, my mom, rushed out of the kitchen, panic carved into her face. She dropped the dish towel she'd been holding and knelt beside me. "What happened?" The words tumbled out in broken fragments. "Some guy, he grabbed me in the tunnel. He tried." My voice broke, collapsing under the weight of it. My dad appeared from the living room, his expression hardening into something sharp. "Call the police," he told my mom firmly, no hesitation in his tone. That night, wrapped in a blanket on the couch, I gave my shaky statement to the officers who arrived. My voice shook with every detail. My hands trembling so badly, one of the cops asked if I needed water. They searched the tunnel. The only trace they found was a smear of blood along the wall. The man had already vanished. For weeks, I couldn't pass that tunnel without my chest tightening. I started carrying pepper spray everywhere, the metal canister, a constant weight in my pocket. Sometimes Marco, my boyfriend, would walk me through it, his hand gripping mine so tightly it almost hurt, but even then, my eyes darted everywhere, searching the shadows for movement. I never saw that man again, but even now, sometimes late at night, if I hear footsteps behind me, even just a neighbor heading home or some stranger walking their dog, I feel phantom fingers tighten around my throat. I hear his voice slick and poisonous slithering into my ear, and I know no matter how much time passes, I'll never feel safe in that tunnel again. I never imagined I'd look back on my university years with such a strange cocktail of warmth and unease. Nostalgia because those Newcastle days were the freest of my life, cheap rent carved up between housemates, nights that bled into mornings with music and cheap vodka, and the odd jobs that paid little but felt like adventures shared in sweat and laughter, but dread, too, because one night from that time carved itself so deep into me that even now in my 30s, I sometimes break into a cold sweat walking down an empty street. Back then, I was 21, studying English Lit by day and working long, blurry shifts at a little nightclub called the Black Swan by night. The place had been there longer than anyone could remember. Wedged into a side street just off Clayton Road, it wasn't glamorous, sticky floors, dim lights, and a jukebox that skipped every third track, but it didn't need to be. We opened late, far later than the polished student clubs, and that meant the stragglers always washed up at our bar, too drunk to go home, not ready to call it a night. For me, that meant decent cash in hand, but also trouble. Last call at the Black Swan wasn't a countdown. It was a war zone. I used to joke with my colleague Hamey that every customer fit neatly into one of 4 boxes. The happy drunks, I'd say, polishing a glass. The ones who hug you, tip a quid, and belt out Oasis on their way out. Then there were the sad drunks, sitting hunched over their pints, muttering about exes and leaving coins stuck to the bar and spilled lager. Next came the sleepy drunks, the ones you'd find curled up in booths needing to be shaken awake like stubborn children, and finally the blackout drunks, the ones nobody wanted. Hamey was the one who taught me how to spot them. You'll know, he'd said, slinging a rag over his shoulder. It's the eyes, glassy, hollow. They're moving, but nobody's steering, not falling down drunk, just gone. I'd seen only a few by then, and every time they left me with an itch between my shoulder blades. It wasn't just that they were odd. It was how suddenly they'd snap. One minute they were statues, the next they were smashing a glass against the wall or lunging at a stranger. We always kicked them out fast before the switch could flip. That's exactly what we tried to do the night everything went wrong. It was a Thursday in late November, the kind of night where the cold feels personal. Damp air clinging to your clothes, sleep like needles against your skin. The club was nearly dead. Just a trickle of students clinging to their pints, a couple of exhausted shift workers, and the usual loners. By 5, we were already thinking of bed, cloths in hand, ready to call it. Then he walked in. At first glance, he looked like he'd just clocked off a long day on a construction site. Steel-toe boots, paint-stained hoodie, work trousers streaked with mud. His hair was unwashed, sticking up in tufts. His skin pale and tight across his face. He carried himself with a kind of rigid weariness, like his body was running on fumes. He didn't slur when he asked for a pint, didn't even sway, just muttered words in a low, even tone. Hamey, generous as always, slid him a lager. Last one, mate, he said, voice firm. We're closing in half an hour. The man nodded, slow and mechanical, and for 20 minutes he stood there at the bar, sipping without expression. Then it happened. His gaze locked forward, past us through the rows of dusty spirit bottles. His eyes glazed over, dull and marble-like, as if whatever part of him that made him human had slipped away. I caught James' eye. He gave me a small, sharp nod. Blackout drunk. I moved closer, forcing a steady tone. Sorry, mate. We're closing up. Time to head off. The man blinked, confusion flickering across his face for just a heartbeat. Then, without protest, he pushed himself upright, body stiff and heavy. No words, no fight, just compliance, empty and detached like a puppet being led. He shuffled to the door, and one of the doormen stepped in, guiding him gently outside with a hand on his shoulder. Easy, the doorman muttered, voice soft as if speaking to a child, and just like that, he was gone. By 6:00, we were finished wiping down the last tables, locking up, and stepping out into the freezing dawn. Normally, I walked home alone. My flat was only 15 minutes away, and at that hour, the city felt emptied out as if it belonged to me alone. I loved it. Headphones in, frost biting at my cheeks, the air finally quiet after hours of drunken shouting and thirring bass. But that morning was different. As I pulled my coat tighter and headed down the narrow side street, I saw him, the blackout drunk. He was perched on a low stone wall across the road, hunched forward, his hands dangling between his knees. He wasn't smoking, wasn't moving, just staring at the pavement like it might open up and swallow him whole. My stomach tightened. It was too soon, too strange. Seeing him again, so close to where we just kicked him out, felt wrong. I slowed without meaning to. His head lifted, eyes that had been vacant and dull only moments ago, suddenly snapping onto mine. There was no hesitation. He stood stiff and deliberate and started crossing the road toward me. My heart gave a hard thud. I sped up, trying to make it look natural, but my pulse betrayed me, hammering in my ears. He didn't speak. He just fell into step behind me, his heavy boots thudding on the pavement, echoing in the stillness of morning. Paranoid, I whispered to myself. He's just walking the same way, that's all. But then, every time I lengthened my stride, his steps matched mine. Every time I slowed, so did he. It wasn't chance, it was shadowing. I fumbled out my phone, forcing my voice into fake cheerfulness. It's loud enough to carry. Yeah, babe, I'm heading home now. No, don't worry, I'll be fine. My throat tightened. What? You're nearby. You can give me a lift. Oh, perfect. Yeah, see you in a sec. The words cracked halfway through my act paper thin, but I prayed he heard it. Prayed he'd think someone was waiting. When the bus stop came into view, I sank onto the bench, pretending to scroll my screen. He stopped a few feet away, just stood there, watching. The cold bit deep into my skin, but the real chill was inside me, coiling tighter with every second. Finally, headlights cut through the dim. Relief flooded me so hard my knees went weak. I climbed aboard fast, tapping my card with shaky hands, sliding into a seat halfway down. Safe, I told myself that over and over. Safe, then I heard it. The metallic clatter of coins in the driver's tray. I looked up him. He didn't glance at me, didn't acknowledge me at all, just shuffled down the aisle and lowered himself into the seat directly behind mine. The silence pressed against the back of my skull, thick and suffocating. My palms sweated. Every bump of the bus jolted through me like a current. I stared out the window, mind racing. Should I shout to the driver, get off early? But each scenario ended the same way, with him still knowing where I lived. I checked my watch. 7:02. A thought struck me like lightning. The Tesco Express near my flat opened at 7 sharp. If I timed it perfectly, I could slip inside, find a guard, make noise. The bus rattled on stop after stop. My throat was dry, my chest constricted. When my stop arrived, I rose. So did he. The moment my feet hit the pavement, I forced myself not to run, but to move fast, cutting across the road, aiming for the glow of Tesco's sign like it was salvation. The automatic doors whooshed open, spilling warm fluorescent light. The relief nearly broke me. I could have wept. Inside, a security guard leaned by the tills, arms folded. "Please," I gasped, stumbling toward him. "There's a man following me." "He's right behind me. Please, I need somewhere safe." He didn't hesitate. "Come on," he said firmly, guiding me into the cramped security office at the back, the kind of room they used for shoplifters. My body shook so violently I could barely string words together, but I forced them out, explaining, pleading. The guard nodded. "Stay here. I'll call the police." Through the slit of the office window, I saw him. The blackout drunk, he hadn't left. He was standing near the self-checkouts, motionless, staring at the office door as if he knew I'd have to come out eventually. The guard squared his shoulders and told him to leave. He didn't. He just stood there, waiting. When the police arrived 10 minutes later, he was still rooted to the same spot. They escorted him out, hands firm on his arms. I never found out if they arrested him or just dumped him somewhere to sleep it off. Honestly, I didn't care. I was safe. But safety didn't follow me home. For weeks, I couldn't sleep. Every late shift was torture. Every echo of footsteps behind me a trigger. My body stayed wired, ready to run. I never saw him again, but those eyes, flat, glassy, empty, are carved into me. The worst part wasn't what he did. It was what he might have done. That silence, that persistence, the way he followed without question, like a shadow attached by invisible thread. If Tesco hadn't opened when it did, I might not be here to tell this. Now, whenever someone laughs off blackout drunks, I feel the chill rise in me because I know what it looks like when the body keeps walking but nobody's behind the wheel. And I know how close I came to being another young woman who never made it home. I never pictured myself as the type of person who'd get caught up in something out of a horror story. My life was painfully normal. My name is Daniel Alvarez, 24 years old back then, living in a mid-sized town in southern Arizona called Fair Point. It was the sort of place where people either knew you personally or at least knew someone who did. The neighborhoods were quiet, full of sun-faded houses, the kind where the paint peeled just enough to make them look tired. Summer always smelled of moss-white trees, heavy and sweet. And when night fell, the streets seemed too empty, eerily empty, like the town just shut itself down. I worked at a Value Max, one of those big chain retail stores. Nothing special, nothing glamorous, but it paid the bills. Customer service, though, wore me down fast, especially around the holidays. That time of year, the store became a circus. Long lines of impatient customers, returns piling up, and that fake smile glued to your face, even when people acted like you weren't human. I tried not to let it get to me. My mom used to tell me when I was a kid that I had the Christmas spirit. Maybe that stuck because even as my co-workers got bitter and short-tempered in December, I still made a point to say Merry Christmas or Happy Holidays with actual warmth. It wasn't fake, I needed it. If I kept spreading cheer, maybe I could convince myself I still felt some. That year, Christmas Eve fell on one of my closing shifts. Officially, the store shut down at 6:00, but customers lingered until nearly 7:00, clinging to the hope of finding a last-minute gift. By the time I finally clocked out, my feet itched so badly they throbbed with every step, and my voice had gone raw from talking to people non-stop. I remember tugging my scarf around my neck as I looked out the front glass at the parking lot. The sun had already slipped away, leaving behind a sky painted orange and pink at the edges, fading into dark blue. The asphalt still glistened from a drizzle earlier, reflecting the glow of the lamps like dull mirrors. The air carried that strange mix of excitement and weariness, families hurrying home, nerves frayed, but desperate for the holiday to feel magical. That's when I noticed him. A man maybe mid-40s, thin frame, short-cropped black hair. He stood near the far end of the lot, away from the cars, like he didn't belong to the flow of people. At first, I figured he was waiting for a ride, but something about him was off. His posture was slouched, shoulders curled inward, as if he was whispering to himself. He didn't move like he was restless, more like he was stuck in his own head. Then it clicked. I'd seen him earlier at my register around 5:30. His purchases were forgettable. Laundry detergent, paper towels, a pack of batteries, no toys, no decorations, nothing festive. Our exchange had been short, polite enough. I rang him up, bagged his things, gave him my usual smile. As I handed over the receipt, I said, "Thank you, sir. Have a happy holiday." That's when his head snapped toward me so fast it startled me. His eyes, framed by thin wire glasses, narrowed like I'd insulted him. "What did you just say?" His voice was sharp, controlled, but with an edge that cut straight through me. I blinked, confused. "Ah," I said, "have a happy holiday." He leaned in closer across the counter, his breath sour with something acrid, and hissed, "It's Merry Christmas." The way he said it, it wasn't just correcting me. It was a demand. I laughed weakly, trying to smooth it over. "Right, Merry Christmas." His stare didn't budge, it clung to me, heavy and uncomfortable, before he finally snatched his bag and walked away. I tried to shrug it off. People got touchy about weird things, especially around the holidays. No big deal. But now, an hour later, he was still there, still in the lot, still pacing near the edge like he hadn't moved on from that moment at all. A chill tightened in my chest. I reminded myself Adam, my coworker, had already left, so I was on my own. My car was only 4 blocks away. I usually liked walking home after shifts. It cleared my head, but as I stepped out into the cold that night, seeing him there under the glow of the lamps, I instantly regretted not parking closer. The man was still there, still pacing. But when his eyes landed on me, he stopped dead, like a statue suddenly remembering how to breathe. My pulse quickened, thirring in my chest so loud I swore it echoed in the cold night air. I shoved my hands deep into my jacket pockets, forcing myself not to break stride. "Don't overthink. He's just waiting for someone. Just walk, Daniel. Just go." I turned left down Maple Street, my usual path home. My sneakers slapped softly against the damp pavement, the sound too loud in the stillness. I tried to focus on the rhythm of my steps, but my gut twisted, a warning I couldn't ignore. Against my better judgment, I glanced back. He was following me, not directly behind 30 FD or so, but his steps matched mine, slow, steady, relentless. My throat tightened, suddenly dry, and I told myself it was a coincidence. He could live down this way too, that's all. But when I turned a corner, he turned. When I crossed a street, he crossed. After 2 blocks, I stopped lying to myself. I sped up, pulling out my phone, pretending to scroll, the glow lighting my face in a false calm. I prayed it made me look casual, unbothered, but the sound of his footsteps didn't falter. Soft, precise, deliberate. "Not tonight." I whispered, breath shaky, "Not Christmas Eve, please." When I reached the intersection near Ridgeway Park, I veered sharply off the sidewalk, cutting across the damp grass. My shoes soaked instantly, cold dew seeping into my socks, but I didn't care. Maybe he'd give up. Maybe he'd decide it wasn't worth it. But when I risked a glance over my shoulder, I saw him stepping onto the grass too. His thin frame slipped between the skeletal shadows of the park's bare trees, following me still. Panic surged through me like fire. "Why me?" I muttered, my voice breaking. My legs carried me faster, walking, then speed walking, then a near jog. Street light stretched my shadow across the ground in long, quivering shapes. I passed the empty swings of the playground, the silent hoops of the basketball courts until finally, other side of the park came into view. My apartment building was only a block away, safety, warmth just a little further. I didn't realize how close he'd gotten until his voice tore through the quiet. Lady has no respect for Christmas. The words were strained, but sharp enough to slice through the night. I spun around, heart slamming into my ribs. He was less than 10 ft away now. His face twisted, eyes wild and bloodshot behind his glasses. His hands clenched at his sides like he was either restraining himself or about to lunge. What do you want from me? My voice cracked. You mock Jesus, his lips curled, spitting the words. You don't say Happy Holidays. You say Merry Christmas or you pay. I stumbled back, shaking my head. I didn't mean anything by it. I'm sorry. He stepped closer, teeth bared. Sorry doesn't save you. Something in me snapped. Fight or flight kicked in, and I didn't choose fight. I bolted. The block to my apartment stretched out like a nightmare. My lungs burned with every desperate breath. I didn't dare look back, but I could hear him. The slap of his shoes on pavement, his ragged, furious breathing growing louder. Closer, my fingers fumbled for my keys as I neared the door of my building. Please, please, please. I shoved the key in, twisted hard, yanked the door open, and slammed it behind me. My back hit the wood, chest heaving, ears ringing with the silence inside. For 1 second, just one, I thought it was over. Then, bang, the door shuttered violently, as if he'd thrown his whole body against it. A scream tore out of me as I bolted up the stairs 2 at a time, nearly tripping, heart battering my ribs. I burst into my apartment, slammed the deadbolt, slid the chain lock across, and collapsed onto the couch, shaking so hard I thought my bones might rattle loose. Outside, faint but unmistakable, his voice carried through the walls. It's Merry Christmas. It's Merry Christmas. It's Merry Christmas. Over and over like a broken record. I sat awake until dawn, paralyzed, too afraid to call the cops, too shocked to even cry. When the first gray light of morning filtered through the blinds, the street outside was quiet again. He was gone. I never saw him after that, not once. But every year when Christmas rolls around and I walk home at night, I hear his voice in my head whispering, scolding, reminding me it's Merry Christmas. And I'll never say Happy Holidays again. I was 24 when it happened, and even now, almost 3 years later, I still feel that same cold twist in my stomach every single time I walk home after dark. My name's Hannah, and back then I was living in a small town called Fairview. It wasn't much, just a quiet little place tucked between a busy highway and a long stretch of dense woods that always seemed darker than they should have been. Fairview wasn't what you'd call dangerous, not compared to the bigger cities nearby. But it also wasn't the kind of place where you could walk around with your guard down. There had been enough stories, muggings, a few break-ins, even a girl who'd gone missing years before, that I knew better than to feel safe just because it was small town. At the time, I was working nights at Miller's Griddle, one of those greasy spoon diners that stayed open past midnight. It was only about a 10-minute walk from my apartment if I cut through the park, which I usually did. Taking the main roads would have added 15 minutes, and after a late shift, those extra minutes felt like hours. My parents hated the idea. They always told me I should drive, but I couldn't. I didn't own a car, couldn't afford one. Rent, utilities, and the never-ending drag of student loan payments chewed up everything I made. Walking wasn't just a choice. It was survival. That didn't mean I was reckless. I kept a small can of pepper spray in my pocket right where I could reach it. I'd taken a self-defense class back in college, and I made sure my phone was fully charged before leaving work every night. But even with all that, there was always this quiet voice in the back of my head whispering, "One wrong night is all it takes." And that night, that Wednesday in late October, turned out to be the night. The air was so sharp it stung when I breathed, and every exhale rose in a cloud of fog that looked too much like smoke. I just wrapped up a long double at Miller's, and my whole body etched from being on my feet. My friend and co-worker, Elise, was clocking out with me. She lived in the opposite direction, but as usual, she gave me that look. "You sure you don't want me to walk at least halfway with you?" she asked, zipping her jacket to her chin. I tugged my hood up and forced a tired smile. "Nah, I'll be fine. I've walked this way 100 times. You've got your kids waiting at home. Don't keep them up on my account." She hesitated, frowning, then softened into a small smile. "At least text me when you get in, just so I know you made it." "I will. Promise," I said, meaning it. We waved each other off, and I stepped out into the still, cold night. Main Street was mostly deserted. By 9:00, most of the shops had gone dark, their display windows just reflecting the glow of the few passing headlights. The silence pressed in, broken only by the hum of a car rolling by every now and then. The park was the only thing between downtown and the cluster of old rental units where I lived. It wasn't much of a park, just a couple winding paths, a weathered playground, and an old wooden bridge stretched over a stream that was shallow but always smelled faintly of algae. During the day it was normal, kids running around, parents chatting, people jogging or walking their dogs, but at night it was different. The lamps along the path barely cut into the shadows. Everything felt hushed and strange, like the air itself was holding its breath. Every rustle in the branches above felt personal, like it was aimed directly at you. I told myself 100 times before, "It's in your head. Just keep walking. Just get through it." And most nights it worked. That night, I was too exhausted to think about anything except getting home, showering, and collapsing into bed. But about halfway through, something changed. That prickling sensation crept up the back of my neck. The kind that feels like invisible fingers brushing your skin. Instinct or maybe fear made me straighten. At first, I tried to brush it off. "It's just the cold or nerves. Don't be stupid, Hannah." But then I heard it. Clear, steady, undeniable footsteps. Not close, but steady, deliberate. The kind of steps that matched mine too neatly to be coincidence. I glanced over my shoulder, my breath catching. At first, there was nothing, just the stretch of the path behind me, swallowed by trees and patchy lamp light that flickered as though even the bulbs were nervous. I nearly convinced myself I was imagining it until I heard it again. Crunch, crunch. Gravel shifting under someone else's shoes. I slowed slightly, my ears straining. Another glance, and this time I saw him. A man head down, dressed in black.